Based on the scientific facts, we can conclude the blood on the shroud and the headcloth is genuine type AB positive blood with double X chromosomes. 2, the blood is consistent with what would be a virgin birth. 3, the blood comes from a person who died a violent and brutal death. The shortest recorded death on a cross in history is Jesus of Nazareth after 3 hours. Why? Because he was nearly scourged to death. Crucifixion is designed to last for days. To scourge and crucify a person is a contradiction in itself. It doesn't make sense. It makes sense in only one case. Jesus of Nazareth. Man in the shroud is excessively scourged and crucified. It points to only one person in history. The man in the shroud / Jesus. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was dead already, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers with a spear pierced his side, and forthwith came there out blood and water. Back to the man in the shroud, forensic evidence. Neither leg is fractured. And there is an upward gouge in the side, a post-mortem event, as indicated by separate components of red blood and serum draining from the lesion. The upward gouge in the side is in perfect forensic agreement with the Roman spear called a hasta, accurate to the millimeter. Back to eyewitness testimony from the Gospel of John. And he, bearing his cross, went forth into a place called the place of the skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha. So if the man in the shroud is Jesus, he needs to show evidence that he carried a heavy weight and that he was at or near the place of the skull, Golgotha, which is located outside the Damascus gate. It goes on to say in Scripture, and as they led him away to be crucified, they laid hold upon one Simon of Cyrene coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross. So if the man in the shroud is Jesus, he also needs to show that he had injuries that made him unable to carry the cross on his own power and needed help. So let's take a look at all of that evidence. Alright, first off, there are multiple abrasion and compression marks on the shoulders indicating the man in the shroud did carry a heavy weight consistent with what would be a cross. There are also multiple abrasion and compression marks on the knees as if they were slammed into rocks and then dragged. The right shoulder is dislocated. It appears to be torn out of the socket. The right eyelid is torn. The right elbow is also dislocated, which matches Scripture. I am poured out like water, and my bones are all out of joint / dislocated. His nose is dislocated. It's abraded, as would occur from a fall or other similar blunt force trauma. The left lung shows contusions on the surface, and it is collapsed. Clearly, this is a person who needed help in carrying the cross. Forensic evidence and Scripture match. But can we place the man in the shroud at or near Golgotha? And the answer to that question is yes. The forensic evidence I'm about to give you comes from the Hercules Aerospace Lab in Salt Lake City, Utah. A rare calcite was found on the heel area, the man in the shroud. It's also observed on the knees and on the tip of the nose. This type of rare calcite can only be found in the soil outside the Damascus Gate. Its chemical composition eliminates it as being possible from coming from any other part of the world. So we can conclude with 100% certainty that the man in the shroud made contact, violent contact, with the soil outside the Damascus Gate
en route to Golgotha. We can place him there. Positively, he was there.
This comes from Isaiah. And so his visage, image, was marred / disfigured more than any man. The man in the shroud is extremely disfigured. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. By his stripes we are healed. The man in the shroud literally looks like a striped man. There's a swelling on the left cheek, a triangle-shaped wound on the right. A section of the beard is ripped / pulled from the middle section of the beard on the right side, and that matches scripture. I gave my back to those who struck me, and my cheeks to those who plucked out the beard. There's more scripture. They look and stare at me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So if the man in the shroud is Jesus, he needs to be without clothes. The man in the shroud is without clothes.
It goes on to say in scripture, eyewitness testimony. Now there was set a vessel full of vinegar, and they filled a sponge with vinegar and put it to his mouth. When Jesus therefore had received the vinegar, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and he gave up the ghost. On the bloodstains, on the shroud fibers, they found that they contained acetic acid or vinegar. This indicates that the man in the shroud would have been exposed to vinegar. Again, scripture and forensic evidence match. All right, let's do a timeline for the burial. Jesus dies at 3 p.m., the 9th hour. At approximately 3:15, Roman soldier puts a spear in his right side, verifies that he's dead. Joseph of Arimathea is present, makes a decision that he's going to go see Pilate and ask for permission for that body. This is done with an extreme sense of urgency. The sun sets, will be setting in Israel at that time around 6:30. So he has less than 3 hours to complete everything. Note the sense of urgency in all 4 gospel accounts. There came a rich man named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. He went to Pilate and begged the body. And he went boldly to Pilate and craved the body of Jesus. And he bought fine linen. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth. Get it out of your head immediately that Jesus was wrapped like a mummy. This is a Jewish burial. Strips of linen go around the shroud, which is a long, wide band of cloth. In the Gospel of John, it's translated as he bought an Othnian, a piece of fine linen, translated as a linen cloth. The Shroud of Turin is a pure linen cloth. A 14-foot linen tablecloth, a 3/1 herringbone twill linen cloth, not the typical plain weave white burial shroud that would normally be used. But how many people are going to be out in the open market selling burial shrouds during the Passover, a festive holiday time? Highly unlikely. But there would be quick access to purchase fine linen tablecloths, table napkins for the Passover meal. We can logically conclude that Joseph of Arimathea, being in a state of urgency to get Jesus in the tomb before sunset, obtained the closest approximation to what he could find that would substitute as a burial shroud, and purchased a fine linen tablecloth and table napkin. The fabric is the same thickness and same threads per surface unit on both the sudarium and the shroud. That indicates same manufacturer, same weaver. Bear in mind, Golgotha is in very close proximity to the Damascus Gate, the main entrance to the city. So if you're selling textiles right before the Passover meal, that's where you would be. And an exotic 3/1 herringbone twill fabric from Syria would be something that would catch the eye of a rich man like Joseph of Arimathea.
And that's exactly what he did. He bought a 14-foot tablecloth outside the Damascus gate and a table napkin for the headcloth. Table napkin and the tablecloth go together. Note for the record, never in the history of Jewish burial has a plain weave white linen been substituted for a 14-foot long tablecloth except for one person, the man in the shroud / Jesus. And the napkin that was about his head, not lying with the linen cloth, is now wrapped together in a place by itself in Oviedo, Spain. Approximately 3:30, the headcloth is applied. According to the forensic evidence done by the Spanish Center for Syndenology, the headcloth was in place, covered a man who was in an upright position, whose head was leaned downward 70 degrees and 20 degrees to the right, which matches the scripture account. Therefore, when Jesus had received the vinegar, he said, "It is accomplished, it is finished." And he bowed his head and he gave up the ghost. Looks like he bowed his head about 70 degrees down and 20 degrees to the right. And you could see on the headcloth that there's pulmonary edema fluid exiting the nose and mouth. These are the first of 3 separate stains that are made on the sudarium. And the first set occur while Jesus is in an upright position on the cross. So we're talking about the time frame right now between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m. During that time, Joseph of Arimathea is meeting with Pilate to get permission to take the body, to leave Golgotha, go to the Temple Dome, and then come back to Golgotha. That is going to take about 1 hour. So Jesus is taken down from the cross at 4:30. That matches up with the forensic evidence on the sudarium. So for a period of 1 hour, the man whose head was wrapped in the sudarium was in an upright position. Then he was placed in a horizontal position for approximately 40 minutes. According to eyewitness testimony from the Gospel of John, who is the only disciple who was present at the burial. Luke was not there. Matthew was not there. Mark was not there. So we're going with his testimony. Nowhere does John say that when Jesus was taken down from the cross, that he was then wrapped in the fine linen that Joseph of Arimathea purchased. John states only that Joseph came and therefore took the body. And then it goes on to say, "And there came also Nicodemus, who brought a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about a 100-pound weight." Whatever Nicodemus used to move that 100-pound weight of myrrh and aloes is the same transport mechanism that was used to bring Jesus from the foot of the cross to the tomb. This would have been some type of wood stretcher that was used to bring Jesus from the foot of the cross to the tomb. In any case, the Shroud of Turin was the final cloth that he was wrapped in. It was not used as the transport cloth. Talking about the time frame now between 4:30 and approximately 5:15 p.m. So Jesus is taken down from the cross and brought outside the tomb. And during this time, more edema fluid exits the nose and mouth of Jesus, and a second set of stains occurs on the sudarium and dries over the first. And when Jesus is lifted up again and brought into the tomb, more edema fluid exits, and a third set of stains dries over the second. And it is at this time Jesus is finally placed in the shroud, and the crown of thorns and the headcloth is finally discarded. So the headcloth was on Jesus for a period of almost 2 hours before being discarded. And then